Today I visit with Jon Hess on Brawley Creek. I'm Rick J, and this is Spotlight on the Arts. Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts, enjoyed by many art enthusiasts worldwide, coming to you from the home of John Hess on Brawley Creek, just south of Warrensburg, Missouri. If you would join me in inviting and welcoming Mr. John Hess to Spotlight on the Arts. It's great to have you with us today, John.
Well, it's really nice to have you out here at this place, because this is a very special place.
Brawley Creek, it just has a nice ring to it.
It does.
And setting out here in the nature, and that's what we're going to be bringing to you today. Not only nature, but a way that John Hess, the professor of biology, and a home on Brawley Creek, right in the should we say, a nature setting. So we hope you enjoy it as much as I am just sitting here doing the interview today. Well, if you would, John, for the viewers, would you please tell us a little bit about John Hess, if you will?
Yeah, I grew up in southern Ohio, southwestern Ohio. Did some schooling in Pennsylvania and Illinois, and last degree, doctorate at Colorado State. And so I struck a middle ground here to settle at the university. I got into bird watching at an early age. I remember a specific incident that started me. And if you check amongst the naturalists, the well-known naturalists, there's usually an event.
Yes.
My event was I was on a bird hike all by myself, and I heard a wood duck land in a little pond, and I snuck up on him with all the skill of a 12-year-old. Sun was to my back, and I got to see the male in plumage, full plumage, and I never saw anything like it.
Yes.
And that meant that I would get involved in the rest of the birds. And eventually, the birds depend on, they nest in this kind of tree, and they eat that kind of seed, and eventually, if you don't know all of that too, you're only getting part of the picture.
Right. So you researched and dug deeper into each type of, I guess, bird you're studying.
Oh yeah. And I ended up teaching with a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology, and I taught ornithology here at the university for 20-some years. Also herpetology, genetics, environmental biology, pretty much the whole schmear of all of those. So, and I did that for 30 years. So
that's why I hear so many students referring to John Hess taking classes. I run across one now and then telling about this project and others.
Interesting.
So that's good. So that was your moment of inspiration.
Yes, it was.
You know, all artists have a moment, it seems like, of inspiration. A gentleman, well-known artist now in the Missouri State, was viewing a Monet painting, and then a feeling came over him and grabbed a hold of his inner sense, whatever, I guess. And so that was, everyone has to have that inspiring moment to really find their passion. And I see that you've gained yours. And now you're sharing that here today with our viewers in a new book called A Perfectly Ordinary Paradise. Please let us know everything you can share with us on the Perfectly Ordinary Paradise.
Well, I'll tell you where the name came from. We have 30 acres here now. We've accumulated in 10 and 10 and 10, but we began cutting trails through it in order to have access. We ran a bed and breakfast here for 5 or 6 years and enjoyed that quite a lot. And the trails were for the guests, and we had breakfast here on the deck, and it was quite a good experience. But when I retired, it was confining time-wise, and so we quit doing that and just saved it for ourselves. But I was maintaining the trails one time with a tractor with a mower, and I stopped and looked at it across the field from my trail, and I thought, this is just incredible. It's a paradise.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's just like every other wood plot in Johnson County. Sure. It's like every wood plot everywhere.
Right.
So it's ordinary. And I thought the paradox of the two actually tells a lot, because so many things are split in two.
Yes.
We have an emotional response, we have a rational response. And in the book, I try to go back and forth between those, because you really need both if you're going to get all of it.
Yes.
I see that the emotional response as you get to a painting, yes, or a photograph,
right,
as that's the icing. But you really need the cake too.
You need to dig deeper.
Yeah, and it's very hard not to. For me, it's very hard not to.
Right.
When I see a photograph, I take in the power of it, and then I start to wonder about, well, what's this doing here? And why is this way? And why is that way? And that's the science part. That's the rational part.
Yes.
And there's a way to combine those two. And that's the driving force behind this book. Right. To take a precious commodity like this place,
yes,
and share it, and incorporate why it is that it's ordinary and why it is that it's a paradise.
Right. Now, you're also a well-known photographer, so this somewhat comes natural, and you're doing your own photography work for the book, I understand.
Yes. As a matter of fact, it struck me the other day that I did an earlier book with the University of Missouri Press, and this book is very much like that one, in shape and size, but it's what you call a coffee table book, but it's not really a coffee. A coffee table book is a book of images that you flip through and look, and this has text. I have about 280 photographs in this next book, the Paradise book.
The Paradise book.
And about 95,000 words of text. So it's very hard to sell a book like that to the industry.
I see.
The first thing, they don't want to know what it's about. They want to know what kind of a book is it.
I see.
Well, this isn't any kind of a book. It's not a memoir. It's not a science book. It's not really a coffee table book, although it has that format to accommodate the photograph. It's not a history book. It's a book about place,
right,
this place, and all of it it's history, it's theology, it's who lives here, how they live.
Used as a text.
It could be used as a text. In fact, I had that in mind for a course that was elementary.
Creative, connection, control. Support the arts and be the change. 24 hours a day, 200 countries. The show must go on. Introducing the world's first exclusive platform for artists and creators of all kinds. The biggest stage on earth.
When you're out there, there's no telling what you'll find.
I see it, I see it! Oh, look at you.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Spotlight on the Arts. I now continue my discussion on a new book that John Hess has written for you viewers. So, Mr. Hess, before the break, you shared a lot with the viewers. You sure have gained their attention by now, so here on Spotlight on the Arts. So, if you would, please continue your review on the new book, A Perfectly Ordinary Paradise.
Yeah, it's interesting to me to try to piece so much into a single book because there, as I said earlier, there's just a lot of facets to be knit together. And I took the position that we live in isolation from it in a way that our ancestors never did. And that's important. It's I've taken the metaphor of a cocoon. We live in cocoons. This is a very nice cocoon. And we drive in cocoons. I mean, everything we do separates us and alleviates the unfortunate parts of life. Mosquitoes, the screen takes care of mosquitoes. It doesn't get cold inside, it doesn't get hot inside. It's just a very wonderful place, and we disappear into it and become foreigners. My role is to, well, suppose you want to know about Italy, and I'm not an Italian. But if I spent some time in Italy, I could tell you about it. I could tell you how good the gelato is. I could tell you some of the experiences that I've had there. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm a representative from outside the cocoon. I mean, I live in one. I like it, like everybody else likes it. But I try to make it as though the reader is puts themselves inside of the characters that I describe. So I do that, and I talk about chickadees, for instance. I mean, everything is common. Chickadees and how they manage to make it through the winter, because inside they're 107 degrees inside. I mean, our brains would fry at their regular temperature, but they're sleeping outside at 10 degrees below zero.
So a chickadee's temperature is 107 degrees,
yeah,
and that's how they survive through winter.
Well, because they lose heat at such a rate that because they're so little, it's another mathematical relationship. That's how that works. So it's a real challenge for a chickadee to survive the night in the winter. They burn about half the calories that they have to spare in a night. So the next day they have to replace all those calories or they'll freeze to death. I mean, they run out of fat to keep themselves warm, and then they freezing and starving, pretty much the same thing at that temperature. So being a chickadee is really tough. You have to look in tiny places. You have to look at the tips of twigs to get your food, and you have to get enough of it to make 5 grams of fat, half a gram of fat a day, in order to survive the night. When we see a chickadee outside, we don't see any of that. We see a bird, and we maybe know it's a chickadee, and we maybe don't. But all of that other stuff brings their existence into awe. You cannot look at the chickadee ever the same way quite again.
I see, yes.
And that's true of everything. The milkweed flowers, the way they work, they're little traps. And sometimes they trap insects and don't let them go. They die right there on them. It's their pollination mechanism. It's really quite unusual. And I lay that out in the book.
Oh, I see.
So, I mean, it's just one thing after the other. I address those seasonally.
Break it down seasonally?
Yeah, I have, first of all, I have a, what I call, linear time. Geological, historical. Who was the first guy that got land here in Johnson County? And one of the guys was right across the street. In 1833, he got here. The original survey was done in 1820, and the guy stopped just half a mile downstream and described this place as second-rate prairie. I thought, I love that.
Yes,
it goes right in with ordinary.
Yes.
You know, doesn't it?
In the same category.
In the same category.
As ordinary.
And then what has happened to this land in the meanwhile, during the Dust Bowl, during all of that time. And I have some newspaper reports about what it was like, because the grandson of the guy that did this interviewed with the Daily Star Journal in 1933 when he was in his 90s.
I see.
And he described what it was like living here, which is here. I mean, right
here, Brawley Creek.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was interesting. And there are some ponds that are now under Truman Lake that track, sort of like the tar pits did in California.
Yes.
And so we have a climate record for the last 50,000 years here of who lived here and in what proportions. And that's just 40 miles from here. So
yes,
I'm here. Then we had a giant beaver, which was the size of a black bear.
Oh.
We had camels and horses and 2 kinds of bison. We had a muskox at one time, and mastodons and gomphothares, and all of those were here.
Around Brawley Creek.
Brawley Creek, yeah. And I tried to establish what it would be like to be sitting here on this deck, looking out at what used to be here.
Yes.
And then the Osage Indians had their time of shaping the ecology here with the burning of prairies and maintenance of prairies.
Yes.
Oh yeah, all that's historical. But when we leave that linear time, we get into circular time. That's the season.
Oh, the seasonal is your circle.
Never an end.
Right.
Never an end to it.
And different, maybe from season to year to year.
It is. It is. Mm-hmm. Every year is a little different. Mark Twain said, history doesn't really repeat itself, but it rhymes. Yes. And that's the way I see it here.
Well, John, I have a favorite saying, and something I learned back in the days of high school, And a quote, I can't quote the person, but they said, sometimes a person cannot see the forest for the trees. Now, I see this book as, again, as I mentioned earlier in the chat, that this is a way to bring the forest out of the trees. People have a block, they can't see any further than the trees, but you got to look a little bit deeper, and that's what this book should.
Have you been looking at my table of contents? Yes, you have. In order to approach both rationally and emotionally, you have to bounce back and forth.
And put it under a microscope,
well,
I guess, if you want to really dig deep.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I have a microscope, and I do macro photography, but I wanted this all to be outside. Almost every picture was taken outside, with the exception of some things. We found some arrowheads that were shaped 6,000 years ago.
Yes, that's where it's going next. If you had found any signs of the arrowheads at the old stage of the mastodons or what have you.
Well, there was a bison found in a creek bed about 10 miles north of Warrensburg.
I see.
And we've got arrowheads out of this creek all the time. It's amazing how many arrowheads were made.
Yes.
That they're just littering the ground.
Right. In certain spots.
One of these arrowheads was a unique kind of chert that comes from near Sedalia. It's a Mississippi, we're Pennsylvanian area here.
Yes.
And the next stage earlier was Mississippian, and as you go east, you go through a Mississippian band, and that chert came from there. And how it ended up here at the headwaters of Brawley Creek, in time to be washed out and to come down here, is a mystery to me.
Oh, yes, that would be a great story in itself.
It would if I had some answers.
Had some answers, a way to receive that.
Yeah.
Well, going back to biology, here at Brawley Creek, it's right behind me, and you can hear it flowing. We'll be sharing some of that flow with the fans. Is it called an aquifer in a biology term that you can actually go deep into the waters and find these biologic, shall we say, not animals, but is it aquifer, I believe?
I don't think that applies here, but I understand what you're talking about.
I see.
We're only 3 miles from the headwaters, as I said, and this is the creek here is now cut about 8 feet below what it was when the Marr family arrived here in 1833.
I see.
And we can see old stream beds, and we can see old oxbows that are now filled in growing things.
Sure.
And I was fortunate to find an aerial photograph of this place in 1940, in October of 1940, and you can see the wet parts of the land. You can see what the floodplain used to be.
I see.
In comparison to what it is now because of the ditching that was done downstream.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, John, looking out here to the east, the northeast, I see a lot of new growth. So is this new growth on a scale of time that we're looking at here? I don't see the 3 foot wide oak, what have you.
Well, that's the thing that the 1940 photograph illustrated more than anything else. That this was open pasture with scattered trees,
yes.
And the up to 10-acre sections were one was a crop field and the other was pasture.
Okay.
And the picture was taken at the close of the Dust Bowl, so it wasn't very verdant looking, not to mention it was black and white. And so it allowed me to find those images, to find those trees that appeared in that image.
Oh, excellent.
And so I took the time, this is a very small piece of the book, so I couldn't stop myself. I laid this area out in 50-foot grids and found individual trees and aged them by diameter, breast height, and then some crude estimates from that. And there are a number of trees here. There's a tree that's 230 years old. It's an oak. There's any number of trees that are about 100 years old.
Oh, excellent.
To 120. But what you see, this forest is all since 1940.
Okay, because this was plain.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Johnson County was 60% prairie. And this area was prairie, and the Osage Indians, with their firing of the prairie every spring, or periodically, in the spring, is what did that. And when you stop doing that, then you get forest. And it's really adolescent forest.
Well, John, when is this going to be available for our viewers to pick up this book?
Well, it's in press at the moment, and we're hoping to get delivery by mid to late October.
October of 2021.
Yeah, just maybe a month and a half away.
All right, great.
And that's, of course, in time for Christmas, just to mention that.
Oh, yes, that'd be perfect. So I want the viewers to look for that publication, and we'll do our best on my end to get the word out on different formats, platforms of the book.
I should mention that the University of Missouri Press is distributing this book for me.
Oh, excellent.
They are, and I am. So my own website at brawleycreek.com will be a place that you can contact me, or you and get the book direct and autographed. And the University of Missouri Press will also feed Amazon and all of the other major book distributors. So it should be available generally.
Well, I'll share with you that this interview today will be going worldwide on a new streaming network that I have gained with partners. This program and many others that we have, but especially this one will be up on Amazon Fire, on Apple TV, Cross TV, and Hulu, Roku, and also a new one, Fan for Me, which will be showing my interviews on a special basis. So you're going to get worldwide and international coverage on the book from this interview. So I'd like to ask you, John, as we come to a near close, if you could look in the camera and tell the viewers one more time what were your final words, if you would.
Oh my. This is, I'm old, right? And I have lived a long time, and I've read a lot, and I've experienced a lot. And I've made an effort to consolidate that and make it internally consistent. And what I ended up with is a lifestyle that I think is really hard to beat. And I'd like to share that in the book. That's what it is.
Well, thank you once again, John, Mr. Hess, in sharing this preview of the book with us, and I'm anxious to looking forward to reading it and making it part of my collection. I might even ask you for an autograph.
I would be happy to provide autographs and inscriptions.
Oh, super. Well, thank you. Well, that concludes another Spotlight on the Arts, taking time out to share a little bit of nature and the story of Jon Hess's A Perfectly Ordinary Paradise. I want to thank cameraman, soundman Jeremy Cash today for his assistance and filming. And I want to thank you viewers for watching now worldwide, internationally, on the different platforms that I've just mentioned. So be safe and stay healthy under the new conditions of COVID. Rick J saying, see you next time, right here on Spotlight on the Arts.